Episode 40, Be a Servant Leader. Welcome to Reviving Your Soul, where Christians are finding the courage to embrace their faith in all aspects of their lives so they can stop being bored or overwhelmed and begin to live the life in fulfillment and in peace that God created them for. I'm your host, Vonna Johnson. Let's get started. I read a quote the other day that really struck a chord with me. It says that oftentimes we confuse leadership with dictatorship. A dictator barks out orders and does not take into account the wants and needs of others. A servant leader is the complete opposite. A servant leader works tirelessly to develop his or her people and is focused on what they can do for others. Sadly, I don't recall where I found that quote, but I do thank the author for their insight. We've all worked with, or at least witnessed, leaders from both ends of the spectrum. Most leaders fall between these two extremes and may even waver between the two depending on the level of stress or how close to a deadline the team may be. We all like to think we are more like the servant leader described above, but are we really getting it? As I mentioned in episode 36, your communication style and why it matters, I, who always felt like I was putting my people's interests first, found myself falling into that dictator style the busier I got and the more stressed out I became. Likewise, the type A director I mentioned in that episode could be very commanding and quite intimidating at times, but was also genuinely one of the most generous and kind people I've ever known. She could be quite tough to work for, but she could also be the first person to commend someone for a job well done. I also witnessed her being the first to step in line to help out a coworker who was suffering a loss or a tragedy. By the world standards, as leaders, we are measured by how much money we make, how many trophies or awards we've received, how big our office is, how nice our house is, what model car we drive, or what brand of clothing or shoes we wear. As hard as we try to keep up, there's always someone who has more and is seemingly more qualified than we could ever be. Even if we love what we do, it's easy to become discouraged if we get into that game of comparison, as we will never be able to get to be as good as we perceive others to be, especially those who rise to the top of any organization or any endeavor. And I wonder if those who do reach the top are really truly happy. It seems that they often are all alone. Sometimes as I observe some people, I can only assume that is because they have stepped on every person that came into their path to get to the top. But my guess is that really there are more people that are there because they have given up everything that was important to them to reach the top. If you do it according to the world standards, you have to press really hard to make it big, and many times at a very high cost. Think about it. How many athletes, movie stars, or million-dollar CEOs do you know that seem to be really happy? Many self-destruct shortly after reaching the top. Is it what they gave up to get there, or is it who they became on their way to get there that makes them so miserable? On the reverse, how many people do you know that have that, quote, dead-end job that they love and who seem to be really the happiest person you know? I believe it all comes down to perspective and what or who we focus on. If we are focused on ourselves and what we can get out of every action we take, we become selfish and uncaring. If instead we focus on our calling and serve others, and by doing so serve God, then we will feel the true rewards in life and can be genuinely happy. God calls us to obedience to Him and His Word. If we give only lip service to God while we are truly worshiping the fame, money, and other earthly treasures, He will leave us to those desires. If, on the other hand, we truly seek Him first and focus on loving and serving the people He places in our lives, the other rewards will follow. I get really uncomfortable when I talk about works for fear that some of you will think I'm talking about having to do all this work to earn our way into heaven. That is not the case at all. Scripture is very clear that we are saved by our faith, and nothing that we can do will have an impact on that. Having said that, though, I also believe that if we love Jesus, we will want to serve others as He did in John 13. We do so to glorify God and to show His love to those in our lives. Our attitude should be the same as that of Jesus. Even though He was God, He didn't demand His rights, but instead made Himself nothing and took on the humble position of a slave. We are called to serve out of love for God and for others, not out of guilt or fear. We get to choose how we look at things. We can expect to be served, or we can look for opportunities to serve others. A verse that really speaks to this can be found in 1 Corinthians. This verse is almost always associated with weddings and love in the terms of romantic love, but listen to it in terms of the kind of love that originates from the heart of God. As you listen to it now, think about it in terms of people in your workplace or your community. Starting in chapter 13, verse 1, it says, "If I could speak any language in heaven or on earth but didn't love others, I would only be making meaningless noise like a loud gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I knew all the mysteries of the future and knew everything about everything, but didn't love others, what would I be? And if I had the gift of faith so that I could speak to a mountain and make it move, without love, I would be no good to anybody. If I gave everything I have to the poor, and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I would be of no value whatsoever. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Love does not demand its own way. Love is not irritable, and he keeps no record of when it was wrong. It is never glad about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Love will last forever, but prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and that special knowledge will disappear. Now we know only a little, and even the gift of prophecy reveals little. But when the end comes, these special gifts will all disappear. It's like this. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child does. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly as in a poor mirror, but then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God knows me now. There are 3 things that will endure: faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. What if, as leaders in the workplace, we incorporated and set the example of exhibiting these characteristics of love in the workplace? What if acts of kindness, patience, and a willingness to bear all things were the norm from every person up and down the chain of command? Can you imagine how much more meaningful work could be and how much more enjoyment every worker could experience? Believe me, we are all tempted by the luxuries that seem to flow easily to those who are willing to cut corners or even to look the other way when the opportunity for advancement arises. But those worldly treasures are only temporary. We are called to step up and to speak out and do what is right. Sometimes that can be really hard to do. But if we remember that God will always give us the strength to do what He has commanded, we are able to do so more easily. Sometimes the strength doesn't come until we step out in faith and then actually begin doing the task. What are you being called to do today? If this has stirred up thoughts of those things that you've been meaning to get to, it may be that now is the time for it. Be bold. Do that thing that has been on your heart to take care of. Life is short, and you are not promised another opportunity to carry out the things that you were created to do. If you like this message today, please subscribe to this podcast so that you can get notified when Reviving Your Soul is released each week. You can find it in the corresponding blog at vannajohnson.com. While you're there, be sure to download my free gift of a PDF of The 7 Mistakes Christians Make at Work. It's in a poster format so you can display it and it can remind you to live out your faith in the workplace. I thank you so much for stopping by today. I appreciate it so very much. So now, go and be a blessing to those you encounter today.